All right, here we go. This time, hello everybody. Anyone watching the recording after the fact, you can skip the first few minutes or so as per usual, as I just get everything properly set. Mute myself, go over here, make sure this is on, and I'm really surprised that the algorithm still hasn't demonetized any of these previous ones. All right, that's on. Get in here. Wait for this to load and load. Dismiss that, load. Okay, live chat. Epic Pen is up. If anybody streams themselves in any way, or you just want something that allows you to draw on your screen, this over here, this software that a lot of streamers use to like draw stuff on the screen and whatnot, this is called Epic Pen. So you can just look that up and you can get that yourself. Epic Pen. It's free. There's paid versions that have like more features and stuff, but the generic version that I'm using to literally just like draw circles around stuff on screen. Can you stop? Thank you. That version is free. So let's get Google Earth. If it feels like loading. Okay, there we are. And the only thing would be Twitter. There's going to be, yes, cats. To anybody who does go to my Twitter, predominantly you're just going to find retweets of from different shelters across different places in different countries of either cats that need particular emergency donations for medical care because the shelter can't actually provide it, or cats that have been ignored and haven't been adopted and have been waiting in there for like years. So if any of you like live near these places and want to adopt said cats, or if you would like to give them your money instead of me, that would also be awesome. But anyways, hold this up. Nothing here. Are these both synced? Okay. All right. So while we wait for our people to show up, some of the quicker stuff first. Over in Syria, so after the fall of Assad and supposed flight of Assad, because the Russian government claims he's alive in Moscow, he just doesn't want to show his face, conveniently, so that there's no proof of him actually being alive. Whereas there's the other hand is the, presidential plane crash, which occurred around there. But supposedly, according to the Russian government, at least, as he left on a different aircraft, and that aircraft, I guess, was just a distraction. But anyways, in the midst of things, right after Assad's fall, while there was no immediate government and the Syrian military itself had basically disbanded, Israel primarily did most of it, but they came in and airstriked everything that belonged to the prior Syrian military, since no one was really operating anything. No one was going to actually like take any anti-air shots. So they basically destroyed almost all of the prior Syrian military's equipment. And now, in the aftermath of that, since even though there is a newly formed government and a recoalesced military, said military just doesn't have anything particularly anti-air systems to actually work with. Now, in the aftermath of that, everybody, Israel, the US via Iraq, and Turkey, via Turkey, obviously. Everybody is now basically free roaming in the skies over Syria and just doing some random smaller scale airstrikes all over the place, trying to target some specific like smaller terrorist sect leaders while they're driving around and stuff. And also, while the ceasefire in Gaza is still holding for 3 weeks now, the one in Lebanon has now broken. As of a couple days ago, Israel started doing some smaller scale bombing and airstrikes in southern Lebanon again. And in response to that, Hezbollah has since begun firing small rocket volleys back into northern Israel again, much smaller and way less effective than anything they did in the past because a huge chunk of their actual arsenal has, been destroyed over the course of all of this. So they don't have that much to work with, but they are firing back now after Israel started airstriking a few targets across southern Lebanon again, just over the last few days after everything there had been sort of quiet on that front for about a month or so. But now that is ongoing. Now we'll go up here, and before I do anything, I'm going to make sure I still remember. Uh, nope, I misremembered. That's Ulyanovsk. This is Nizhny Novgorod. Okay, so and Ryazan is right. It is the end one, and then the other one was Rostov. Okay, so up here, actually, let me check chat. Do we have anybody? Hello, regular person, and looks like no one else, at least speaking wise. So we are getting strike after strike after strike. So for over a year and a half, Russia has done nightly swarms of Shahid drones into Ukraine. To little effect. We spoke about this the last few streams. They kind of target completely random stuff. A school here, an apartment building here, a random power transformer here, a sidewalk there, literally a traffic light at some random intersection in any given city. So they have been doing this to basically no real effect, similar to how they've used their cruise missiles. And, this is kind of an interesting facet because if they actually had used, especially the cruise missiles, but also all these like tens of thousands of Shahid drones at this point to actually target like real military things like, I don't know, airfields over here or something, Ukrainian positions along the front line, Russia would be doing a lot better in this scenario, but they didn't, so they're not. Now, after about 3 years, Ukraine's their production rate and capacity of their Beaver drones and other drone types has reached parity with Russia's production of Shahid drones. The Shahid drone originally being designed by Iran, and it's actually a really decent design. The thing is, the ones made by and in Iran work a lot better than the ones made by and in Russia. So that power dynamic between those two has kind of flipped technologically. But now Ukraine has reached the point where it's outputting its own enough to do nonstop nightly drone strikes into Russia. And we are at just about a straight month now of nonstop drone strikes. on Ukraine's part into Russia, targeting primarily the thing that would hurt the most. Apart from nearby airfields to the front line, which it has struck a number of times, usually going for the very poorly sheltered and very poorly organized bomb piles that are just sitting on the tarmac next to the Su-25s or Su-34s. They've been hitting the oil and gas infrastructure. Most recently, they hit the one in Ryazan from the last few streams you remember. And every time that fire gets put out, which it doesn't really get put out, it just kind of burns out because Russia's firefighting capacity is apparently non existent. Ukraine hits it again and is just keeps taking chunks of its existence off. Now, a couple nights ago, they hit a big refinery in Nizhny Novgorod. And that one was, oops, no, forgot. I have to switch back to mouse cursor. And that one, yeah, this was a pic from far off on the horizon. So this was from quite a ways away. And the close-up version, we get a few of them. That was the initial fireball. This was, got your dude out there just chilling in front of his car, just watching the refinery burn. Pretty bored, I guess. And here's another one once everything was really up and going. Just, burn, baby, burn type stuff. So, the total from these, the Nizhny Novgorod one is about 400,000 barrels per day of refining capacity. The Ryazan one is about 300,000 barrels per day of refining capacity. So that's about 700,000 barrels per day of refining capacity offline between those two. And then on top of those, there's another one down in Rostov here that was hit weeks ago before the major swarms began. And that's a smaller one. However, it just now finally broke down from some of the more minor damage that it accrued. While it was operating today, it's apparently just different parts of it just like blew out. And so now that one's offline. So that's another 150,000 barrels per day of refining capacity. So in total, that is uh, over the course of basically a week and a half, that is 850,000 barrels per day of refinery capacity in Russia that has now gone offline. And there have been other hits elsewhere. In Bryansk, there was a hit again on a piping or a pumping station for internally, obviously, there's the network of pipelines that like pump the oil different places and stuff. I don't know the exact layout off the top of my head, but you get the idea in general. There'll be like the pipeline network, and there along the network, there's pumping stations to keep the flow going, and this is true of any oil pipeline network anywhere. So different pumping stations have been hit, including one up here in the Tver region, and that one has failed completely. And because of this, the lack of flow that is causing down here, the Luga oil terminal in the Leningrad Oblast has had to shut down because it just can't receive oil because they can't get it to flow through the pipelines. And in terms of the output rate or the export rate from that terminal, that is on average roughly 700,000 barrels per day of oil or fuel exports heading out. So that is now down. Capacity to make that up by slightly higher, slightly raising numbers at other export terminals. I don't know, but a few 100,000, not the entire loss, but they can probably hover like 300, maybe 400,000 of that. So still, the overall loss number would then be, obviously like 300 or 400. And thusly, that would mean now, because of the inability to actually send that oil anywhere and the, constant loss of storage depots, places to actually store the oil while it's waiting its turn to get refined or while it's waiting its turn to get loaded onto vessels for export because it's not like a teleportation system. One ship has to come in, sit there, get loaded, and then it leaves, and another pulls into its place, gets loaded, and then it leaves. So, the oil has to sit somewhere while it's waiting its turn to get loaded onto a ship or to get, shipped to like fuel stations throughout the country for domestic use. So, the like overall actual output loss from that, assuming that they up their exporting from other terminals to try to compensate, will not be a full 700,000 barrels per day, but it will be around like probably 300,000, which will thus mean, since that oil can't go anywhere, Russia will have to decrease its actual production, its actual output, which they've already been doing, shutting fields down gradually as, things head downhill, since who, those companies like BP, Equinor, especially the Norwegian one, and others who rescued Russia's oil production after the USSR collapse. They are obviously not in Russia. They've been out of Russia for 3 years now, and the Russian oil industry cannot really hold it together on its own. So, after the immediate drop in oil production that you saw from customer absence, that then recovered a bit as they started exporting more to China and India. Their production has since been on a gradual downward slope because everything is slowly decaying and they can't really keep it together. And as of most recently, uh, before this stuff happened, before these past few days, as of last week, Russia's oil production, their oil output level, had declined now down to 8.93 million barrels per day. So with this, it's probably potentially going to see a abrupt, like sharp drop like that by a couple 100,000, and then might be able to hold flat because of that for a little bit before it then resumes still going down from that point. Obviously, if they're smart, they'll, choose to shut down the fields that they were going to have to shut down next anyways, or they could be dumb and, just shut down completely random fields, but we'll see what particular choices they make in that regard. Let's see. Do we have anything else there? Ah, yes. So, you guys may remember over time we've discussed that for Russia's, oops, look, zoom in, for Russia's relentless bonsai charges, kamikaze attacks, they gradually declined, like stair stepped down over time to, having, actual like mechanized units, down to having semi units down to having to rely a lot on IFEs and AFEs down to having to do a lot of stuff with, motorcycles and golf carts. And along the way, they have, pulled interesting things out of ancient storage from Soviet times to use in these vehicles that really should not be used for this because they're in this particular field of stuff, aka charging across fields literally. They're essentially just coffins. And those are the MTLBs. Nope, that's copyright. That might be copyright, but you didn't specify, so you don't get to get away with it. Actually, this looks like a better one. Really? Fine, I have to actually open it. And you're going to open it in paint? Come on. These things are MTLBs. They are amphibious lander vehicles, river crossing vehicles. They're not meant to be used for, rapid, like, field crossing charging attacks because they're not rapid. So they've been getting used for that purpose, though. And we are now at a point where across the various storage sites throughout Russia where ancient Soviet stuff is stored, all over the place. We're now at a point where they are empty. From the most recent satellite imagery, all of them for the MTLBs, not that using the MTLBs was a good idea, but regarding their MTLBs, which they had to resort to using after expending their real armored personnel characters and infantry, armored personnel carriers and infantry fighting vehicles. Now, their storage bases are completely out of those. So there are, that doesn't mean they're going to vanish from the battlefield immediately. There are, like the last ones that were pulled from storage are still sitting in like readying groups and going to be sent to the front line soon. But in the roughly near immediate future of the next month or two, you're going to see those finally vanish from use on the front line and from existence in Russia's arsenal, at least. So now we're going to start hitting the point where we're going to be down to nothing but motorcycles and golf carts and some redneck ATVs, too. But that's the general overview for how things are going in the Russia-Ukraine situation at the moment. Now we're going to jump to, after I check chat in a second, the most recent pop-up development, and that is stuff going on in the Congo, where things have gotten heated up most recently. And everybody's saying yo, except for Paul, who greets with an exclamation point. Uh, yeah, it's been it's been kind of a shock and surprise to a lot of people, uh, myself included, and actually a lot of our strategy planners included, how not impressive Russia has actually ended up being in reality. We kind of expected more, if you even in the like civilian population over here in the West, you actually look at all of our games, like all the Call of Duties and stuff. We always like portrayed Russia as like completely like equal and everything was always a 50-50, and we went head to head and everything, and it was like this big epic battle. And that's not the capability we're kind of seeing. But Down to here, however, the Congo, the bigger Congo, this one, the Democratic Republic of the Congo, the one that's always been unstable, is getting more unstable. So their largest city in the east, Goma, has now been completely overrun by the M23 rebels, who are backed by Rwanda and Uganda. And the rebels have gradually, taken big chunks of stuff up here, over the course of the last couple of years, anyways. But those were smaller cities, and it was mostly areas around the tantalum mines that they were after because Uganda and Rwanda want control of the tantalum mines to, get the profits from those. Uh, However, the M23 rebels, while they are serving Rwanda and Uganda's needs by seizing those mines for them, the M23 rebels do have their own aims also, which is to, you know, uh, kind of dethrone the current Congolese government. Uh, there is, they're not really clear about their like current overall aims. So they do want to like oust the current government. They do want them to fall, but we're not really sure that there's hasn't been a lot of consistency from them other than that over whether they're trying to create a like separatist state like right here, which it was kind of like one of their things in the past that they wanted. But you see, the thing is, the M23 is a continuation from a it's a continuation from a past rebel group. So you got M23, continuation from a past rebel group, which itself was a continuation from a past rebel group, which itself was a continuation from a past rebel group. This stretches back about 40 or 50 years. For those who may be familiar, there were two big wars called the Congo War and the Second Congo War, which, saw the Congo in big chaos and everybody died. Off the top of my head, I know the numbers for the Second Congo War between 1998 and 2003. The death toll was over 5 million. So, in those different wars, the government in Kinshasa over here was a military dictatorship both times, and various groups wanted to, overthrow the dictatorship, obviously. So different rebel groups formed up, and different countries, Uganda, the East African nations, Rwanda and Burundi, Angola, the Congo's other neighbors, Nigeria, Ghana, South Africa, down in the south. Everybody was getting involved, secretly sending troops, because some people wanted the dictator to stay in power because he was giving them favorable trade deals. Others wanted him to fall because he was kind of, doing the typical dictator stuff of, like massacring millions of people through deliberate starvation, just your standard modus operandi. So those wars were pretty big in terms of death toll, not in terms of like what you think of when you think of big wars, where you think of these huge like major aerial and naval and multi mechanized shifting conflicts like World War II or Gulf War type stuff. This was primarily through both these wars and is now uh, guys in camo with some AK-47s fighting each other, occasionally with some Jeeps, some really old Humvees, some RPGs, and some really ancient tanks sometimes. We're talking like T-55 type stuff or old M60 Patton tanks. But the so yeah, the prior rebel groups were part of like fighting those. But then after that, uh, after the wars were over, the government also was still dictatorship because the previous military dictator just got couped, which is a thing that happens. So the M23 over here kept fighting against the new dictatorial government over in these regions, and eventually in 2019 they finally had an election for real, and they elected a guy, and then we waited to see, the whole world waited to see whether there would be, another actual election or whether this guy was just going to hold on to power forever like everyone before him. But there was, I can't draw a good enough thumbs up, so you're just going to have to get a check mark. There was actual elections afterwards, and he got voted out and actually left office. He didn't try to not leave or have the newly elected guy killed or anything. So the Congo has some tangible democracy now, but now it's kind of broken down into, it seems like the M23 over here just doesn't like the guys that are actually getting elected. So they're still fighting. And I mean, part of this is them being egged on by Uganda and Rwanda because those two want the mineral resources in the Kivu region here because that's some dollar signs. Tantalum is rather pricey and rather critical, and is only really found in mineable amounts in the Congo, uh, Colombia, over in South America, and Australia. So that's big money, and they're into big money. So the M23, their thing now is they still say they don't like the current government and it's still evil, even though the dictatorship is out and we've seen multiple actual presidents change actual elections. So then there's also the off and on narrative of maybe they still want to do a separatist state, but they're just being really unclear about what they're actually after. So now it's kind of starting to come off like fighting for the sake of fighting, and it's turned into a big mess. However, the Congolese military can't handle them. So they've, like I said, they've gradually, taken over more and more stuff, especially the mining areas. Now they've overrun Goma, and everyone in the surrounding area is starting to flee from surrounding settlements and just the province overall, which is, causing strain and stress elsewhere in the country. As now we are getting into a point where I think they said 2 million people have now fled and are just like pouring into other areas, like much, obviously, you can see via the comparison, much smaller cities and settlements. I think Kisangani is one of the ones where people who are willing to go the longest distance are flocking into. So, starting to cause a whole down spiral here. But I put again in parentheses in the title because chaos in the Congo, the larger Congo, is not something new, but this is still like a massive, abrupt, sudden upsurge of it. This just happened over this past week. Goma just fell to the M23 over the course of the past week. So gonna wait and see if they progress further, and if they do progress further, see if they like stop anywhere, like if they get up to like all this points and just like stop here, because that's where all the tantalum mines are, and also would kind of be the borders of what their original separatist state was going to be, or if they like keep pushing out, At which point that would, in reality, that would entirely be at Uganda and Rwanda's behest because they'd be wanting them to do that to continue pushing the Congolese military back so that they would have complete security over the tantalum mines around here. But we'll really, really have to wait and see for that one because, like I said, it's become really like ambiguous as to for the M23 themselves, what are you actually after at this point? Because we know what Uganda and Rwanda want, but like, what do you guys even want anymore? Because we are having like elections now in the Congo. The Congo now has democracy. The military dictatorships are gone for the time being, but you're still going for it. So we have to wait and see how that goes. And that's probably going to be it for this one. Probably I said I was going to be done by 6:30 Eastern or 2:30 in Alaska time or real time, but ran a bit over. I'll be doing another special or big video soon. Not big as in length, just as in importance. Because I did the one that everybody got angry at and hated. If you guys remember the solar power, the math for solar power doesn't work video. Now I'm going to be doing one about wind power and about how wind does work if you put it places where there is eternal wind, so that the power is not intermittent and is actually perpetual. One of the most famous places that the one I always mention is the crossing the cross wind between the North Sea and Baltic Sea in this general area, North Germany, Denmark, southern Sweden, just offshore of Norway, and also parts of the Netherlands. Here, there is actual eternal wind. The direction changes. The speed can sometimes get a bit low, but there is actual, literal, eternal wind. And that's not the only place on Earth where there is. There are other locales, but people misconstrue that, and their idea when I say you have to put it where there's eternal wind, it means places where it's windy a lot. And eternal wind does not mean it's windy a lot. It means eternal wind, perpetual wind. The locations on Earth where that is the case are a lot fewer. However, there are a number of them, like a decent enough number of them, to where a decent bit of wind power could be generated and could actually be perpetual, like almost to the point that, we consider like baseload type generation to be perpetual. But that's only in certain areas. I am making a video soon that will be showing and going over those certain areas, including showing quick recordings from like the global animated live wind map, where it shows, arrows literally like moving across the map, animated and stuff. So I'll be doing that soon, so look out for that. Other than the normal monthly data updates and stuff. So that's going to be it for this one. U.S. We as in what in terms of outward policy at the moment, we don't specifically support anyone. Uh, our again, as I've said before, in case you're new, the thing with the U.S. decision making apparatus is are you disrupting the system? Because if you disrupt the system, aka global trade overall, resource supply to the broader outside world, that is what will draw the U.S. to act against you militarily or otherwise. And Uganda and Rwanda uh, are they're taking over the tantalum mines, but they're taking over them to then continue exporting the tantalum and get the profits themselves. So that's not disrupting the system. They're just changing it so that they're the ones who get the money instead of the Congolese government. So for that reason, at the moment, the U.S. like officially militarily doesn't really support either side. If the M23 starts like doing wacky stuff and starts like doing massacres, then that'll tip things into what the US decision making apparatus considers inconvenience mode, in which case, then we would by default support the Congolese government and would do things to enact in such a way that they can push the M23 out rather quickly because they would be rather easy to deal with since they're not, you know, really a military, or we would just twist Uganda and Rwanda's arms to give it up. But at the moment, since they're not doing anything super wacky, and since, the tantalum is still flowing out to the outside world, it's not a super huge area of concern. And also, the US and Canada technically get most of their tantalum from Colombia, anyways. But they would still be concerned about the overall global supply. Uh, yeah, I know they're Tutsi, but yeah, they like I that is my thing. Like the only thing I could think of is that they still do want the whole separatist state thing, but they're kind of pushing beyond the point now where if you keep going like this, now that the narrative of fighting against the military dictatorship, which was that was the a legitimate goal and was the goal for like 4 decades. Now that that's no longer the case, if you just keep going like this, and it's clear that it's just like separatism, that's gonna that's not gonna have anybody like on your side anymore. Uganda and Rwanda are going to be on your side because they want the cash from the tantalum. But you're not going to keep like public opinion with you for much longer. But anyways, that will be it for this one. And these are synced up, right? Okay, that is. All right, that's the same. All right, just checking. And we did not get Josh today because I did not alert him because I didn't want to bother him. He is setting up his new computer, which he bought months ago and did not set up for months. He just left it sitting there because he's lazy. And no, he shouldn't be upset by me saying that because he knows he's lazy. But anyways, that's it for this one. So thank you everybody for showing up and